Despite an ever-increasing variety of things to help us manage our lives better, for many of us, life just seems to get more and more complicated. Welcome to Solutions for the Mind, the official podcast from the Association of Solution-Focused Hypnotherapy. I'm joined by solution-focused hypnotherapist Katie Churns of Songbird Hypnotherapy to talk about some of the things that we can do to help us cope better with the juggle of modern life.
This is Solutions for the Mind from the Association for Solution-Focused Hypnotherapy.
Hi Katie, lovely to see you. What has been good with you recently?
It's been really sunny, hasn't it? So lots of good dog walks. I've been out earlier today, had a week off. Yeah, just getting outside a little bit more.
And I think that's quite a nice kind of intro into our podcast today, because we're going to be talking a bit about kind of how to have a better maintenance of your mental health. So what things that you can do to help with your general well-being and in life to make sure you're feeling as good as you can be.
Yes.
So on that note, what I would like to know is, in your opinion, what is good mental health? So what does it actually look like in today's world?
Okay. I think it is all about just coping and managing the best that you can and able to deal with like the struggles of life in the best way possible. It's not being, that everything's amazing and perfect, because it's not going to be. Life's always going to throw us challenges, isn't it? So it's just about our resilience as such and our ability to cope and manage better and just feel a little bit more balanced, not feel like low and anxious and miserable all the time, but just navigate those moods when they do come along.
Yeah, I get that. So, because it's an interesting idea, isn't it? This belief that we should always be able to cope with everything all the time and be perfectly fine, but that's not the reality of life, is it? So it's
No.
just being able to find a way to feel a bit more able to cope, I guess, and feeling a bit more on top of things.
Yeah, just a bit more in control, I think. It's a good way
Yeah.
of looking at it. And content with what's going on and how you're managing.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know about you, but a lot of people are telling me at the minute life is quite stressful. People are feeling quite
Yeah.
kind of like overwhelmed, and there's quite a lot of like negativity and stresses out there. So what is it, do you think, that makes people feel so overwhelmed in their lives at the moment? What's going on?
I think it's just the stress. I say just, but it's the stress of modern life that is just unfortunately constantly getting busier and busier, and all of those things that we're now expected to again cope with, the pressure of all of the little things, just the rushing around all the time, the places to be, meeting times, all of the what we call the micro stressors, like just juggling, like, the chores at home, cooking, cleaning, looking after kids, looking after pets, looking after ourselves, like meeting deadlines. It's the busy pace of life that I think throws everybody now. And if we think about, as humans, what we were supposed to do, we weren't supposed to be juggling all of this and working 40 hours a week and looking after everybody else. We were just supposed to be out there, just one job to focus on at a time. And obviously all of the technology alongside that as well, that we're constantly kind of feeding ourselves. So yeah, people don't necessarily realize, I think, that it is just all of these little things that do
Mm.
cause us the stress and put us into kind of that anxiety mode.
That's interesting you saying that, because I think a lot of people assume like there has to be like this one big stressful event in your
Well,
life.
that's the majority of clients that I see. They often can't pinpoint like why they feel the way that they do. And once we start to work together, it becomes clear to them that it is just like these little things. And organization is a massive thing with people, I think, like because there's so much to juggle, just having a little bit more routine, structure, organization. And it's all of those things on top of any big things that we do have going on, that it just makes things harder in life.
Do you think that that's because people expect they should be able to cope with it all then?
Yeah. Yeah, I think lots of people do. And I think, again, social media has a big part to play in that. Technology, that they're looking at everybody else. We're comparing ourselves and looking at other people and thinking, oh, they seem to be doing okay. But actually, no, like nobody has it all together. But then because we're just seeing a snapshot of something, we're just constant comparison, which then builds extra anxiety as it is. People are just putting so much pressure on themselves to do everything and get it right. And then it just becomes even more of a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Do you think social media is part of the reason people are feeling as anxious as they are then?
I think it plays a part, doesn't it? I mean, like if you think about as humans what we were supposed to do, we weren't constantly like seeing people doing different things. We lived in a
Mm.
tribe. It was our own like little world. We weren't seeing snapshots of, people all around the world doing like, different things all the time. So if it's constantly in our focus, then we are going to be thinking about it and comparing
Mm.
ourselves.
Like that feeling of keeping on top of everything, but then also the kind of it's all there, it's all available to you, isn't it? It's ever present. So how do you even switch off from it? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
why can't we just rest? What's wrong with us?
Because there's so much to do all the time, isn't there? I think it is like never like it's that feeling of I can't stop because there's always something else to do. And like through work that I do with clients, part of that is them sort of slowly learning to realize that you can't physically do everything. There's always going to be something else to do. So it's the pressure that not only we put on ourselves, but I think kind of pressure from society sometimes as well that, we should be getting everything done. And at the end of the day, we just can't. There has to be some kind of cut-off point, and for lots of people, there's not. And also, like expectations, depending on your work and your job. Like if you're in, corporate jobs or whatever, like lots of long hours commuting, traveling, and actually, where do you then get the time to stay on top of the other things, let alone rest and reset?
Yeah, it's hard. So because you've got, like you said, the societal expectations, you've got your own expectations, and some of it is real, some of it's realistic. It's not just
Yeah.
fictional. So it's hard to know how to slow down, I guess, and how to rest. So on that note then, as an expert and somebody who helps people all the time about kind of managing their anxiety and learning how to live more restfully, what would you say to your clients and are the most important things that you can do to help yourself?
So in solution focused hypnotherapy, as you know, we talk about 3 Ps, sometimes 4 Ps, which are positive actions, positive interactions, positive thoughts, and sometimes talk about positive purpose as well. So in terms of positive actions, it's even just those small little things that people don't necessarily realize they can start to build in that are going to make a difference, whether it is just like building 5 extra minutes into the day or, making sure that you do take a lunch break or putting your laptop away when you get home, whatever that might be. And sometimes those positive actions might be delegating. I think that's a big thing, like especially for people in business and particularly women as well, like trying to take everything on board on your own and realizing that actually you can ask for help, you can delegate tasks if it's going to make things a little bit easier in the long run. And those positive actions can be like putting the boundaries in place. That tends to be a big thing that people, see a positive difference from, like starting to say no to things a little bit more, saying yes to things that they actually want to do, and just pushing back on things and really prioritizing, I guess, is a good way of thinking about it. Just
Mm.
prioritizing what really does matter, like what they need to do to look after themselves. The positive interactions is huge, like making sure that you are getting time to be with friends and family. And again, it doesn't have to be like the big things, going out and, seeing people, even if it's just messaging people or a quick
Mm.
coffee here and there. And then just, organization, routine, structure in terms of giving yourself purpose. So it's those small things, slowly building them in, that people then start to see, I think, the biggest difference, rather than trying to overhaul your life in one go, which, as we know, doesn't It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I think a big thing is allowing more time as well. I think so,
Mm.
like so many of us live our lives on that fight or flight, just rushing from one thing to the next and the next, and
Yeah.
even just, getting up 10 minutes earlier or allowing yourself 10 minutes more to get somewhere so you're not like late and then you're constantly rushing around. I think that's a massive thing in modern life is just constantly
Mm.
having to be places at a particular time and then running late and chasing your
Mm.
tail with stuff, which is where stress builds up.
Yeah. So if somebody was really struggling, say, I mean, like I have it as well in my own personal life and with my clients, where do I stop? Like, what do I give up? What do I not do? What's your advice then in terms of how do they tackle that? How would you, if you were working with somebody, what advice or how would you work with that person?
Helping them to kind of look at the priorities and what's important first. So, for
Yeah.
example, like I said earlier, is it that actually the most important thing that would start to make a difference is like building time in to see your friends, or is it actually it's going to be going to bed earlier? Just looking
Yeah.
at like the first little thing that would start to make a difference,
Mm.
and then going from there step by step with it.
Yeah. So if somebody felt really overwhelmed and says, nothing I can stop right now, between you and your client, you'd be able to identify that there's going to be one thing that you can say no to. Let's work out what it might be. Or there might be, like you said, one thing you can do differently, like going to bed earlier. And it's not an
Yeah.
impossible task. It's something that everyone can do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, it's not often, I think people think it's about adding stuff in, but it's often about taking stuff out as well. So, for
Mm.
example, I've had a client today and they're going to start just putting little reminders in their diary for things.
Mm.
So, even just that is a small positive action just to keep a little bit more organized. And that's not necessarily about adding more in or taking anything out. It's just something that's going to make a difference to how they run their busy life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So it's very kind of a positive way of thinking, of feeling more proactive and feeling like there's something you can do to change your situation. I think that's what's kind of the main message so far from what you've been saying.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think when we're in the midst of feeling overwhelmed and stressed and anxious, like it often does feel like there's nothing that we can do differently. But just when we start to think about it and when we've got the support of someone else, there's always a little something that can start to make a difference.
So in terms of the way that you work when we're using solution focused hypnotherapy, then, if you were to
Yeah.
say, compare it to other types of therapy, what would you say are the main differences?
So the main differences are that solution focused hypnotherapy is very future orientated. So it's all about helping you to look at what you want to kind of see yourself like, what differences you want to see in yourself, how that would look like going forward, and how things are right now, and how you can work to change that rather than having to kind of go back and analyze things and look over things that have happened previously. That's definitely a key difference. In terms of the solution focus part, it means that we are looking at, like we've been talking about, how to make kind of proactive changes, look at what's working, what's not working, which is then going to ultimately help us to get where we want to be. So rather than more problem focused therapy, which is sitting and, talking about the problem, but then perhaps not identifying any actionable steps. That's the difference. Obviously, in terms of the hypnosis side of things, we use that so we can tap into the subconscious part of our brain as well as the conscious part of our brain. So the sessions split into almost two parts where we do the conscious thinking and like make those changes, but then we've also got the hypnosis where we're activating the subconscious part of our mind as well. So yeah, very different to most therapies out there, but obviously absolutely amazing. And lots of people come having tried lots of different approaches and find that this is what really helps them. And
Yeah.
also it's, helping them to understand how their brain is working as well is a big part of it, why they're feeling how they're feeling, getting the kind of the neuroscience understanding as well, which they may not get from other therapies that they've been to.
It puts everything into real life practice, doesn't it? So all of the things that we've been talking about, it's a useful place for people to work out how to make those changes
Yeah,
and identify what those changes could be, and then what life would be
yeah,
like when
yeah.
those changes are in place. And typically then when people start doing this, but so when people actually start kind of going through this process of working out what they want to change and going through making some of those small changes and small actions and using the hypnotherapy part of it, so the actual kind of the subconscious part of their brain, what do the people generally notice first? Like from your clients, what do they notice is different about their lives?
I would say the first things that people start to notice are sleep. The sleep starts to
Yeah.
improve, and sleep is crucial for us,
Mm.
operating from the right parts of our brain and feeling more in control and everything. So sleep is definitely a thing that people start to notice, and just starting to feel like a little bit more positive, kind of noticing things that are going well is something that people start to notice first. And then as they go further throughout the process and they start to kind of pick up on what they can change and make those little changes, then they just over time start to notice themselves just feeling, more positive, more confident, coping and managing better. As we said at
Mm.
the beginning, it's not about like those bigger things not happening. It's just noticing, oh, okay, actually, like I didn't respond in that
Mm.
way that I previously would have done. I didn't get angry in the traffic or whatever the
Mm.
situation is. Just having a much more kind of rational, positive approach to life.
Yeah. And I can see that having that rational approach and being able to kind of pause it and think about what you want to happen next is going to really support in making some of these changes in itself because,
Mm.
you can identify that's not something I want to do. So I'm going to say no
Yeah. Yeah.
rather
Yeah,
than,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
it's just all about forming those new habits, sorry, and pathways, isn't it? And the more
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
kind of
Because you mentioned that kind of fight flight response. And would you say, like, a lot of people, when they come to see you, a lot of your clients are in that fight flight response and a lot of their decisions, therefore, are coming from that place?
yeah, yeah, definitely. As I said, from just like the general kind of busy rush of life and rushing around and then kind of not thinking straight, thinking negatively about things, or even, not able to make decisions because they're not thinking about it rationally and logically. So it's
Mm.
just reducing that response and starting to think a little bit clearly, a little bit more logically about things as they do come in.
It makes me think about the fact that there are stresses in life that you can't really change. There are stresses in life that you can change, but then there's also stresses, and it's your reaction to the stress, isn't it? So
Mm.
it's how you're
Yeah,
dealing with that, like what that means to you. And from what
yeah,
you're saying, the bits that you can't change, you're going to be able to accept more freely when you're not in that kind of
yeah,
primitive fight or flight state. You're going to be able to work out how to make the changes when you can change something, but then, like you said,
yeah,
you're going to notice that you're reacting very differently to when those stresses do happen. So it has like a really lovely halo effect across your whole life, doesn't it? And
yeah.
being able to,
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, like you say, that domino effect of noticing in other areas, and often clients will come with a problem. But then they'll see, positive effects in their life from all different areas they didn't actually realize that they were
Mm.
struggling with, but things slowly start to get better and they then realize, okay, actually, that is better than before.
I think it feels really nice to kind of take back a bit of control. And like you
Mm,
said, feel that sense of, okay, so I know there's some stuff that's going to keep happening, but I can choose how to deal with this. I can choose how to respond. Um,
yeah.
So for you then, if you were working with somebody and they just said, um, what how do I start? A tip for anybody without coming to see you and they look at their life and they just go, I'm so stressed. What would your advice be to them? Where would you tell them to start?
But get them to think about if they were to over the next week, if they were to notice themselves feeling a little bit better, get them to think about what area in their life would be a little bit better. Is it like that you'd want a little bit more time for yourself? Is it that, you'd be finishing work earlier? Just starting to think
Mm,
about that one thing and going from there, and then thinking about, okay, well, what is one small little actionable step that you could start to put in place? If
mm,
you're really, really struggling, I always think like organisation is one of the biggest things that I see people
mm,
changing their life with, like seeing people change their lives just from buying a diary and just getting things out of their head and like list making, prioritizing.
mm,
It's just all of that information that we hold in our head as well. And that's something that I see quite a lot of is people beating themselves up for like forgetting things, but they're just
mhm,
trying to hold it all in their brain, and their brain's not designed to hold so much information. So, if you're really, really struggling with where to start, maybe think about, is that something that could be a little bit better? Because I think it is for all of us. Like, there's so much to hold. Like,
mm.
just looking at how you're organising yourself and structuring your day routine is a big one.
Yeah, yeah. That list that you were just talking about, I think there's some useful things about that list as well, isn't there, in terms of what you're putting on that list? Because if you're putting the whole
Mm.
entire contents of your head on
Yes,
that list and
exactly.
expecting to do it in a day, that's probably going to cause you a
Yeah,
bit more stress.
yeah.
So, how would you, if somebody wanted to create like a really useful list,
Mm.
what would your advice be on how much to put on it, or how to think about what you're putting on it?
I think looking at your day, like the night before, and just think like time blocking and just thinking
Hmm.
about, okay, like what does, you know, first part of the morning look like, next part of the morning, so on, and just really thinking about what's realistic, and then
Mm,
kind of blocking the times out, thinking about where things are going to fit in and do
yeah,
it that way. Because you're right, like we can overwhelm ourselves with too much to do, but where does it fit? It's got to be realistic and,
love that.
leave
That's
ourselves
definitely,
enough time.
yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that's for me probably one of the most useful things, that it's asking yourself the question, when, at what point in my day am I going to actually do this thing?
Yeah,
Otherwise you can end up with an endless list and at the end of the day just feel like
yeah,
you haven't achieved anything.
yeah,
But I love that idea of finding a block of time in your diary to do the tasks that you're saying you need to
yeah.
do, because then it makes it more achievable, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's something that I do every night now and have been doing for a couple of years as a result of having some sessions myself. Is just night before I sit and I write some things that have been good down every day, and then I look at like the day ahead and just like plan out like what I'm going to do, like where my exercise is going to fit in, like where my walk's going to fit in, all of that sort of stuff. Otherwise, it's
Mm,
things like that that we miss out and we don't fit in because we're trying to fit all of the work stuff in and the chores and everything, and it will always be the things that we need to do for ourselves that we then don't fit in. So if you can like block them out and prioritize them,
mm.
then you're more accountable. You can see it like visually in your day, especially if you do it the night before, and then you can sleep on it and your sleep helps you to process it. So yeah, that can be really helpful.
I love that. And can you explain to the audience the benefits of putting that time in there for doing the walk or going to the gym or doing some of that nice non-work related stuff? Like, what happens in your brain when you're doing that stuff?
Yeah, so when we were talking about positive actions earlier, this is, part of that is a positive action that we can do for ourselves. And what happens is that we release some of the good neurotransmitters that we need. So, we talk about dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins. We get them in all sorts of different ways. And if we're starting to build more of those in, then it counteracts those stress and adrenaline levels, brings them down a little bit, gives you a little bit more of those good neurotransmitters, which then help that logical part of your brain to just be able to cope and manage better, as we've said, be more resilient, all of those things that generally we want to be. Whereas actually, if we're not building them in, we're just constantly running on that fight or flight mode, on the cortisol, the stress hormone. And that's then again when we operate from what we call the primitive part of our brain, and we think negatively, feel
Mm,
low, anxious, everything else.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting because a lot of the time when you say anything about getting outside and going for a walk, people just roll their eyes instantly like, "Oh, that's not gonna make my life different." But actually, you're saying, "No, it does because it helps you cope better with life. It helps you deal with the stressors. It might not fix everything on that walk,
Mhm.
but you're gonna have more resilience, more capacity
Yeah.
to cope with the stuff you've got to do next."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a huge, huge believer in taking time away from the thing that you're trying to do to give your brain a little
Mm.
break and enjoy some of the other
Yeah.
things that go on, being more present and just kind of
Yeah,
getting out of that
definitely.
brain.
Yeah, and I think that another really common perception is that if we work quicker without breaks, that we're actually going to be more productive. But it's actually the opposite, that our brain works better with those breaks. So if you're going to like focus on something for 45 minutes, take a 10-minute break, even if it's just go and stand in the garden, get a cup of tea, whatever it is, then you're actually going to come back to that task that you're doing and be more productive. Or if it's,
Yeah,
take your lunch break, things like that. No, we're not supposed to be able to just, especially now, like stare at a screen for
no.
8 hours a day. So,
Yeah. And that comes back down to that stress that you're saying about, yes, there is this expectation, but also you're adding to that by not giving your brain a chance to have a break. And then I see it with a lot of my clients where they're just pushing through and they're going, I've been staring at the computer for half an hour and I can't. That's the point where you need to walk away from the
yeah,
computer, go and do
yeah,
something different, give your brain a break and come back to it rather than trying to finish because that's going to make you feel more stressed.
yeah, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's always a good one. And then before we finish, you mentioned something that I want to go back to, which is every morning you write down something good, or did you say every night you write down something good?
Yeah, yeah, every evening. So I write down a list of a few things every day that have been good. Encourage all my clients to do that as well. So reason why I do that and encourage clients to do it is just because our brain works on what we call an activating system, which is a little bit like an algorithm. So if we're always looking for like everything that has gone wrong that day or everything that we haven't achieved, then our brain starts to scan for more and more of those things. And in turn, it creates more stress hormones. Whereas actually, if we're starting to look for the little things that have been good or the little things that we have achieved, obviously, it doesn't mean that the day becomes great and amazing every day. Of course, it doesn't. It just means that we build up more of those good neurotransmitters that we talked about and build up more of those pathways in our brain to be able to cope and manage better. So it's something that does really make a big difference. And it's one of the easiest things that you can do as well that does make a big difference. And hard at first to do for anybody because your brain's not used to working in that way. But the more you do it, the
Mm,
easier it becomes.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
so it can be anything. Anything. Doesn't have to be big things, just anything at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just from what you've been saying already, there's some really easy air quote things that you can do. They are difficult to implement to start off with. Like you
Mm.
said, you've got to get into that habit of doing it. But once you start doing them, they're not, expensive. They're not really time
Yeah,
heavy. Anyone can
yeah,
do them. And it's
yeah.
going to help be able to kind of cope with some of the stresses and some of the everyday stuff that's happening in life. Um, so I think that's a really helpful, really positive thing to end the podcast on today. It's
Yeah.
been so great to chat with you, and I feel already motivated to go and sort my life out after our chat and block some time out in my day to make sure I'm putting in the stuff I need to get done. And I definitely think it's like a nice, helpful reminder for everybody that these are things that we can all just come back to all the time, can't we? There's no like end to this. We can keep doing it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's about reassessing, like, as life changes, so, things are gonna work at some point in your life and things are gonna need to change at other points.
And if people are getting to the point where they're trying some of these things and it's helping somewhat or they're finding it quite difficult, then obviously that's when we would suggest that they might try and have some therapy, solution focused hypnotherapy
Yeah,
to help bring some of this stuff together. And then they can continue to do that stuff on their own as well
yeah.
after. So, um, Thanks so much for your time, Katie. Hopefully this podcast has been interesting, and if you've enjoyed it, please do subscribe and follow us for more updates and more information on all things to do with mental health. Many thanks to Katie for sharing her expertise and insight. Find more useful resources on the Association for Solution Focused Hypnotherapy website, including a directory of solution-focused hypnotherapists to help you. The link is in the description. If you found this episode useful, subscribe for more Solutions for the Mind coming soon. Thanks for listening.